in my introductory photo. That's because of the news that the Kazakh police, according to Kazakh officials, have shot dead scores of people in Almaty and killed some of the people in other cities. So what's been going on? Well, on New Year's Day this year, 2021, the price of liquefied natural gas more than doubled. Went up to about 28 cents per liter. Look at US dollar cents. Obviously, it's tenge in Kazakhstan. But I'm not going to cite that currency because an international listenership, viewership won't know what that is. So that has hit people in the pocket. This is a country where most people live on something like 150 US dollars a month. So that's serious. And that's used as the main fuel for vehicles. Now, most people don't have cars, but they go by bus. Bus tickets are going up, or they purchase items which are delivered by truck. So that's hitting them in the wallet where it really hurts. So, and it is also highlighted how the president and a tiny number of his cronies are getting filthy rich by huge-scale defalcation, by sweetheart deals, by kickbacks, by corruption, plundering the national wealth, stealing tens of billions of dollars and expatriating it to buy mansions and penthouses in New York, London, other places, Dubai. So there were furious protests, particularly in the northwest of Kazakhstan, the most oil-producing region. So there's a country which was practically floating on oil and gas, and yet the prices are so high because it's more profitable to sell it abroad. So ordinary people have been really suffering for a long time, and there's this microscopically small proportion of the population who've been creaming it off. The golden circle doing a golden shower on everybody else. And outside the major cities like Almaty and Nur Sultan city, most people living in relative poverty. I'm not suggesting anybody's dying of malnutrition, no, but they have a very hand-to-mouth existence, considering you have to spend a lot on clothing because it's so ferociously cold, like it can be minus 30. And you also need to eat a lot. You need to do calories just to keep yourself warm in winter. You need two totally different wardrobes because, of course, it's scorching hot in summer, having such a continental climate. Well, these protests turn angry. They spread across several cities. Now, the Kazakh authorities have been very jittery in December because of the Zhenauzen massacres. 10th anniversary came up. Zhenauzen is a city in the west of Kazakhstan where a lot of oil workers, they've been protesting since May 2011 up to December 2011 because they've been very badly ripped off. There was this new system for their payments, and its opacity was notorious. They found they'd been paid less. They believed the people at the top of the company were doing this to rip them off by taking a few dollars a month after all of them so that the super rich could get even richer. This is a country which doesn't have freedom of speech, which elections are an absolute charade, are totally rigged, where peaceful protest is regarded as a serious crime, where you required police permission to hold a demonstration, that permission being almost never granted. People in the last couple of years did as simple as writing quotations from the Kazakh constitution and holding it up on the street, and they were arrested for that, for quoting their own constitution, as though that was a crime. Who did that harm? Quoting the constitution. Staggering. So that the government is deeply suspicious of civil society. And so the leader of the nation is Nur Sultan Nazarbayev, and when retired in 2011, the capital Astana was renamed Nur Sultan City in his honor. So there's a cult of the personality around him. He's in his 80s, probably suffering from prostate cancer. He can scarcely walk. The current president is Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, who Nazarbayev chose because he's a bit of a grey man, distinctly lacking in charisma, doesn't have a personal following, so no threat to Nazarbayev, very much in the system, very much an apparatchik, not going to rock the boat. So the situation was sort of spiraled out of control, and the police did manage to disperse protests as it spread. They tried turning off the internet in various places to prevent people communicating. But in Almaty, the situation got more out of hand, and there were several thousand protesters gathering, and a spontaneous fury at years of living in penury. So the authorities claim that terrorist gangs had taken over and murdered several police officers, but there's no evidence of this, photographic evidence, video evidence. I mean, which organizations are there? Have they arrested any terrorists? What goals are there? I mean, guns? How do they get guns or bombs? They said that several police officers have been killed. They didn't say they've been shot. And all right, they might have been killed. I don't know that to be a lie. I mean, I suspected they were lying to prepare a narrative so that they could go and kill lots of people, because is a former Soviet republic, and they often run that way, will accuse the peaceful protests of killing police officers, and then will come in and kill dozens or hundreds of protesters. So even if some protesters did kill police officers or use any violence, they're no longer protesters, they're rioters, or indeed they're murderers. So I wouldn't have sympathy with that. The police should not be killed. The police shouldn't brutalize people either, which they very often do in Kazakhstan. So the airport was briefly taken over by demonstrators. It's since been cleared and retaken by the authorities. But today, the 6th of January, the authorities said a total of 13 police officers have been killed since the beginning of the disturbances and 300 wounded. So there was a shooting in Almaty. Now, they haven't made an official statement, but bureaucrats have said this to the international media, that scores of people have been shot dead. And I thought they were going to try this one. They said it's because of outside forces, so foreigners. They will always try and delegitimize any protest movement by saying, oh, it's the machinations of some foreign conspiracy. And these people are financially motivated, says President Tokayev. Well, they are, insofar as they live in abject poverty because of him and his policies, his coterie, who are ripping off the working class and the middle class. So a state of emergency has been declared all across Kazakhstan, and there's a curfew in force. I know of an old woman in Almaty, very frightened, staying in, phoning her relatives. So anyway, there's a resentment at Kazakhstan being a grossly unequal society. It's a typical benzene republic, a phrase of my own invention 10 years ago, a bit like banana republic, but the curse of the resource-rich country, where whoever controls those resources is stinking rich, has all the power, and then most people live in poverty, and the wealth is filched, and the rest of the economy doesn't really develop. So the leader of the nation, Nazarbayev, and his family control huge swathes of the economy. A lot of money vanishes into the bank of nowhere. Even in the 90s, a time of severe hardship, he was getting hundreds of millions of dollars. So the internet's often been shut down. I think it's come back on since. Banking transactions have been frozen. There are long queues at cash dispensers. There's a halt on foreigners coming into the country because they think, oh, well, they're part of the conspiracy. So Kazakhstan's a member of the Collective Security Treaty Organization, along with Russia, Belarus, Armenia, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan. So Nur-Sultan City formally requested Russian military assistance. On the 6th of January, Russia obliged, and they airlifted hundreds of troops to Almaty to bolster the Kazakh security forces. So this Kazakh imbroglio is a deeply unwelcome distraction from Russia when it wants to concentrate on intimidating Ukraine. But Moscow cannot afford to see the second biggest erstwhile Soviet republic falling into chaos or else unfriendly hands. Kazakhstan is enormous in area, the ninth biggest country in the world in land mass, is about how many million square kilometers? I can't remember. Is it 7 million? It's only slightly smaller than Australia, but it's got 19 million people. So anyway, Kazakh and Russian sources have said that, well, external forces have caused all this, but they haven't pointed out the blinding obvious thing. The whole thing was sparked off by this more than doubling the prices of this liquid petroleum gas in one day. So the government was newly configured to try and assuage public fury. President Tokayev, he ordered the cabinet to resign. They all resigned, including the prime minister. He's put in a new, bland mind like himself, a safe pair of hands, the former first deputy prime minister. Former Soviet countries tend to have several deputy prime ministers, first deputy prime minister, second deputy prime minister, third deputy prime minister, and so forth. So there's a new configuration to the government. And Tokayev, for the past couple of days, saying, okay, I hear you loud and clear. I shall deal with your grievances. He's announced the reversal of that fuel price rise. I mean, if the country is really suffering financially, why don't the super rich pay more tax? That'd be an obvious solution, rather than making life even worse for the much put upon 90% of people who are working class. So Kazakhstan had some very strict limits on what you could do during the COVID pandemic, and no doubt some pent-up frustration coming out because of that. The economy has suffered seriously over the last 2 years. So cost of living is an acute problem here and in several other Soviet countries. Years of real terms falling incomes, and so this has led to violence, and there really is no outlet. Peaceful protest is very seldom allowed. Elections where there's just no chance that a real opposition party is going to win. The Nur Otan party, Light of the Fatherland party, it rules, leading them on the Nurli Jol, as in the bright path. So Mukhtar Abulyazov, a former highly successful banker, he supposedly ripped off hundreds of millions of dollars from Kazakhstan. He's living in France, which refused to deport him. He leads the Democratic Choice of Kazakhstan, this underground illegal party, and he's in call for protest as well. But the government will seize on that to say it's all his doing, it's all a plot. So some Kazakhs there chary about inviting in Russian troops. You bring them in, you might never get them out, despite supposed Soviet fraternity. So Putin himself in 2014 said that Kazakhstan was scarcely a legitimate state, that no Kazakh state had existed before. Well, one had existed in the 16th century, and every state's got to exist sometime. There was a time when Russia didn't exist as a state. But nevertheless, Kazakhstan is also in the Eurasian Economic Union. Some other Russian politicians made these unfriendly remarks. It doesn't have a right to exist, so they should get some of this land. I wonder if Putin thinks if he gone for the wrong target. Ukraine, a country of 48 million people, relatively small in area, somewhat defensible, adjacent to NATO countries. They can easily ship in weapons. Kazakhstan, huge in area, indefensible because it's got an extremely long frontier with Russia, only 19 million people, and a large ethnically Russian minority along the frontier with Russia who might welcome Russian troops, and it's a resource-rich country. In Ukraine, there are actually very few precious natural resources. Why didn't he go for the bigger prize, Kazakhstan, at least part of it, which he could have quite easily have conquered? And they're not next to any NATO country. Nobody else was going to come to their aid, so perhaps a big mistake. Although the trouble is it does border China, so the Chinese might not like that. All right, so that's enough from me. Well, it's a very sad situation, and the Kazakh authorities have dealt with this in their usual style. So the real death toll, they probably won't release the real numbers, is also redolent of the Zheltoksan massacre in 1986, when probably hundreds of people were shot. The authorities say it was about 4 at a protest in Almaty when Gennady Kolbin, a Russian who'd never been to Kazakhstan, was appointed general secretary of the Communist Party in Kazakhstan, effectively governor of Kazakhstan, having replaced Din Muhammad Konayev, who was an ethnic Kazakh who was very popular and quite effective. So Zheltoksan meaning December, and that's commemorated every year. And Nazarbayev, well, he was part of the Soviet apparatus at the time. He was Prime Minister of Kazakhstan. He never spoke out about it at the time. He was obviously complicit in this massacre. And presumably the orders came from the top this time to kill unarmed people. I'm not certain they were unarmed, but I think it's highly likely. Where would they get guns from? Guns are extremely tightly restricted in Kazakhstan. If you're not in the police or the military, it's almost impossible to get one. Homemade Molotov cocktails? Okay, if someone tries to kill the police entitled to defend themselves and kill them. But I think it's just shoot dead the unarmed protesters. Conciliation didn't appear to work, so probably mass-scale violence. A bit like this, the experts say about the Zhanaozen massacre 10 years ago. The police wouldn't kill dozens of unarmed people unless there were orders from the top. This is a place where people don't take initiative. You can get in big trouble. You wait till there's a crystal clear order, do it, and then they would do it. But then blame will be deflected down. If someone has to carry the can, it'll be a local police chief. It won't be the Minister of the Interior, the Prime Minister, Minister for Justice. It won't be the President. Certainly won't be Nazarbayev. He's got that title. Leader of the nation for life. He's also chairman of the National Security Committee, so he doesn't have to do these burdensome public appearances. He and his family are immune from prosecution and even from criticism. To criticize him as a crime. Now, why does he think he needs to be immune from prosecution? What guilty conscience does he have? What crimes does he know that he's committed that he needs to have that there? All right, that's enough from me. Very dispiriting, sadly. And I know some Kazakhs are apathetic, who know the situation is totally unjust, but there's nothing they can do about it. And if you stick your head over the parapet, you're just going to get whacked very hard. You lose your job, banned from your occupation, years in jail, massive ruinous fines, have your passport confiscated. So there's just no point. You have to make the best of a dreadful situation. How lucky I am to live in a free country. Toodaloo.